Are we on?
Mhm.
Oh, hi. Hi, I'm Farah,
And I'm Nicole.
and this is our first podcast. So we're pretty excited and nervous. But we would love to introduce the company and why we do what we do, in Sonnenberg Consultants in general. So, and then we'll go into a little bit of research and things like that. So I'm Farah Sonnenberg. We've been in business for 20 plus years. I've been in the field for 27-ish years. So it's been really fun, and the field has really changed quite a bit. So we're really excited to talk about why we're different, why Sonnenberg's special. And I'll be kind of interviewing, we'll be kind of interviewing each other to make it a little bit more flowy, I guess, if that's a word.
I'm not a good camera person.
Are you scooting off?
I'm like
Bye. Oh, I'm just kidding. You need to get in here. So that's what we're gonna do. So hopefully it's just a natural conversation and we kind of talk about Sonnenberg Consultant. So I'm Farah Sonnenberg, that's Nicole. And we wanted to just talk a little bit about our background. So I wanted to see you want to talk about your background and why did you get into this field and how did you get into this field?
I got my bachelor's degree in early childhood education. So I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher for some time. I had my twins pretty young and was pregnant with them while I worked at a daycare. So I raised the twins and I worked as a twos teacher at a daycare. And one of the parents asked me to start watching her son outside of the daycare, and she was an ABA. And so she was like, I think you'd be really good at this. And so I was like, all right, yeah. I mean, I had nothing to lose. I'm like,
why not?
Why not? So the first day I started in ABA was the first day I signed up to get my master's degree.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So I just went all in.
Wow.
And I never looked back. So that's
well, and tell them what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Because you haven't stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I am getting my doctorate now. I finished up my research in August, I want to say, and now I'm just writing my dissertation. So all the coursework and everything is done. Yeah. I sometimes joke and say I have a PH without the D because the dissertation's not done. Yeah.
That's funny.
So, and I actually came from an ABA company to Sonnenberg. And the reason I came to Sonnenberg was because the other ABA company I was at would only really take like 5, maybe 7-year-olds, like in that age range.
Okay.
And I really wanted to broaden my horizons. I was new to the field. I was getting my BCBA supervision at the time. So I just wanted to see other populations and just like a different skill set. So I came here and I remember that it was like the middle of social group and we had all these kids and Charmaine was doing my like in-person interview and she just leaves the group.
I remember I was like there.
Completely walks away. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm gonna run social group today in Charmaine's absence. And so I did that.
It's totally who you are though. You just are like, oh, let's go do it.
Yeah, you just go do it. I'm definitely a doer. I choose something to do and I do it all. And so in that social group, there was a lot of different age groups.
Yeah.
A lot of different skill sets. And I remember my interview with you and you saying, like a lot about the company and how different it was and how we didn't go off a script or we didn't program to the assessment. There's a lot of out of box kind of thinking, and that's something that I was looking for and I really wanted. So even though you guys were an hour away from my house,
that's crazy.
You were the only company that I interviewed with that did that.
How many did you interview with?
There's a couple companies like in Illinois, larger companies, that have clinics all over the world, really. And a lot of it was the same thing I was doing before. Some of them wouldn't take kids past 7. You only do the BB map, assessment. You only program from there. And that's really it. And that's boring to me.
Yeah.
I'm somebody that once I know something,
What's the next?
what's the next thing to learn? So I'm a natural learner in that way. And yeah, I mean, people ask me all the time, you've been driving an hour, commute to and from work for 8 years. And I'm like, yes, I have. And it's because there's nothing like this program.
Well, that was a good introduction.
Yeah.
Because that's part of our questions. We kind of tried to cheat and have a few questions, or I did. That was just to kind of keep us on track, hopefully, because I'm like squirrel,
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's great. I think that brings us up into our mission, our vision, and our values. You kind of started that. That was important, I think, for me to focus on what does make us different. Because ABA there's good and there's bad things out there. And I think some things are very valid depending on if you're stuck in 1960 or something, and it's just constantly evolving, which is what I think probably hooked you, right? Because it's constantly changing, and we're disproving things, and it's the research, it's the replication. So but I think what I really take pride in as an owner is the culture, and trying to contain or keep or evolve that culture into a place where we have these values that it's only been in the last couple of years. So 2020 happened, and everybody knows 2020 was obviously a very hard couple of years, 2021 with COVID and just all of the world's controversies and things like that. So we got coaches, and we started to address some of those topics and hard topics. So that's what the values came out of, was what do we really see ourselves? Why are we different? What kind of person and people do we want working here? Do we want the families to also uphold and be respectful with each other, and have this mutual back and forth? So that also obviously comes out of the mission, and the mission has changed recently too, to include our values. So that's something that I wanted to just kind of touch on. It basically is our values. We are committed to encouraging and supporting our staff, our clients, and families by taking action that is aligned with our core values of accountability, teamwork, communication with respect, growth mindset, solution-oriented, and creating equitable access. So I think I showed this in the video before, but if you can see that, is that backwards? That's the right way, right? Those are our values, and that is what we function day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. We have to constantly remind and come back to our values. What does that mean to you, and how do you feel like that's made a difference with us?
I think it's made a difference in every aspect, really. It's made a difference in how you supervise others. It's made a difference in how you mentor parents, mentor like new staff, the whole onboarding. It's changed that.
Sure.
I think just every piece of it. What it really got us to look at was how important relationships are. And in this field, there's not a lot of like courses in how to really be like a people person.
Right.
I mean, or how to have the type of relationships that you need. I mean, we're technically in a human resource field. Like there's people that it's all people. And yes, we focus on science, but what about their relationship?
Right. If you don't have a relationship, you have nothing. I mean, that even supports the science, really.
Yeah.
Because it's all the beginning of pairing and, relationship development with the kids. It's really the same with us. I think that gets overlooked with those beginning steps, or actually throughout too. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's supervision, when you go to school to become a BCBA or, more, that's not the part that is really super focused on. In fact, that's really a difficult part. Would you say?
It is a difficult part. It's not focused on. And to no fault of anyone's. I mean, there's a lot that you need to know about the field, and a lot you need to know about the science. So I don't know, maybe I think that it's evolving, right? Like I think there's more kind of like diversity and inclusion and like pieces that are tied to ABA now. And our values really brought that, like those relationships to the forefront, because that was what was in the front of our minds all the time. We went in with the intention to build relationships,
Right.
and our values allowed us to do that. And making sure that we always communicated with respect, we held ourselves accountable and held others accountable, and the list kind of goes on and on with that.
Yeah, and it was interesting because we've changed, we've updated, and I'm assuming we'll continue to update, because it is challenging to know there's so many values and there's so many things out there that you're like, well, I really value that and I really value that. So what I think is really great about the values is anytime something arises, typically, if there's an issue that arises or something, to be reminded, okay, to bring it back to the values. Does this align with a staff member? Does this align with a coworker or a parent or, with whatever? And so I think that has made it much better. So it's just consistency, I think, as long as we keep coming back to that. And then also with that, we use, this is a really good resource. It's called Nonviolent Communication, also compassionate communication. This was something that everything is based off of how we communicate. Do you want to explain that a little bit? I think that's really helpful and important to what we've been doing too.
Yeah, I mean, compassionate communication really allows us to handle conflict and to have crucial conversations. And it was really important to have that as a resource as the world kind of crumbled for a little while, honestly. There was a lot of very stressful situations that occurred in everyone's lives, really. And so we kind of leaned on this compassionate communication for that, so that we could have these conversations and we could do that effectively, really.
For sure. I think that changed. I mean, I think what I really love about all of this is it's just constant learning.
Yeah.
It's constant, our growth mindset value means you never stop. There's never we're done, and I think that also sets us apart a lot, because a lot of what I've seen out just in life is there's this is it. Good job. High five. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Where we're like, okay, this has changed, or this isn't quite embodying what we're trying to do. So what can we do? Equitable access was one that we really took a whole year to figure out.
Yeah.
Because what we had prior was just not, it was just really not being interpreted properly, and it wasn't getting what we were trying to accomplish with consistency. And that, there's just differences with all of us, and we want to celebrate those, not say you have to fit in this box, but still be accountable, still have to go through the steps, and still, use all the other values, teamwork and communication and all those other values to get to that end result. So do you have anything to say about that one? Equitable access that you feel has changed? Because I think that's changed the game too.
That has changed the game, because our intention is to meet people where they're at. I mean, that includes our employees, that includes our clients. You always meet that person where they're at. And so with the equitable access, it means that we have these resources for you to get from point A to point B. And we have these growth opportunities for you and all of these resources. And people are accountable to do those resources or gather those for themselves. So yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of, what we have now brings all of that together, because what we had so many resources, and we have made job descriptions for certain people or differentiated that, and we've done a lot of that, and that can also be complicated in individualizing too much in that way. So equitable access changed the game for us in that, like, here is all your learning opportunities, here's how you grow, here's how you can do better for yourself and for your clients.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and that was definitely the missing kind of direction that we didn't quite know how to lay out. So I think that made it really, it just made it more clear, I think. I mean, I always think there's more to do. I always think there's so much to learn. And our next step now is we're creating a system in our software that we're really excited about too. So we already have the next step. We're starting, we have a goal where we have a couple weeks to get some of the drafts done, and then make sure we're rolling out for 2023. So I think that can be challenging for some people when we're like, that's not working, we need to change it, we need to do that, where some people, I think that can be difficult for, like, slow down, we need to do this, but if it's not working, it's not working. I don't want to do something that's not effective, or effective, the kind of effectiveness that we need, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of growth mindset. Teamwork is so important, because you got to depend on each other, and that what I'm supposed to be doing, I get it done. And if I'm struggling, that I ask for help. That's kind of every part of our team. Do you have anything to say about that? That is either,
I mean, I think that kind of brings us to integrity, right? Because yes, we're all a team, and without our team, we're nothing.
Yeah.
And in that same concept, there's this integrity. So if you don't do what you said you were going to do within the group, then that whole team falls apart.
Yeah.
It's not just you not saying what you said, and having your word be like whole, sound, and complete. It's also that the team struggles as a whole. So that's something that we've been looking at too.
Yep.
So
that was this is another resource that we go off of. Everything that we go off is definitely has some backing and some, research to it. So pro-social is another, it's group integrity that Nicole is talking about, and much more. It actually goes into ACT, right? So,
yeah, there's some ACT concepts there. Yeah. Thanks to Steve Hayes. Yeah. There's some ACT. Yeah.
So that's a big thing that you brought in too, that you were really passionate about, which is the field is much needing. Can you describe that a little bit? Because I think that is definitely a newer-ish thing to the field based off of how it began.
Yeah, that's been my favorite thing thus far to kind of lean into. I went to an ACT boot camp in Fort Lauderdale, I don't know, a few years ago or so, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
And I looked at it as like, wow, like this is so impactful to my personal life and things that I've been through, that I just wanted to bring that back to the organization. And so we kind of started with doing some matrix, talking about our values, what was important to us, talking about behaviors.
There's that word again.
Yeah, right? I mean,
it is. It all is full circle.
Yeah, I mean, behaviors that take us away from those, how we get closer to our values. And it was really something that is embedded in most things right now that we're doing. And the matrix is just an example of that. I in fact have adult clients that have their own matrix, and they follow it, and they have their committed actions based off of it. And yeah, I mean, it's a reminder that the values are at the forefront.
And so much more to learn and keep going with that. I know Nicole and staff are really working on showing that and how to implement that with each other and with, like you said, with clients and parents.
Parents do
so we're all kind of coming back to that, what's really important to each person, right?
Yeah.
And what takes us away from that. So I think that's really good. And it again brings that full circle of values. Just it puts things into a structure of this is what we do, this is what we do next. And it can be different for every person.
Yeah, and I think when we started it with parents, it had an even larger impact, because oftentimes we kind of say, okay, like the parent must want to work on communication. Why wouldn't they want to work on communication? So you put in some parent goals that maybe they don't value.
Right.
So in doing that whole matrix piece within parent mentorship, we were able to come out with committed actions that became their goals. So they were more invested.
That's awesome.
Into completing those, rather than us making assumptions, because we also know what assumptions do.
That's a big one. As anyone could take away, regardless if you want anything to do with ABA or not, is these simple things, like assumptions. You assume something about someone or a situation, and really it's an assumption, and then you get yourself into trouble. Can you think of an example that would be an everyday kind of situation that you assume that seems like it's so obvious and you're making an assumption that really puts you into a bind, or that observation without evaluation type of thing, because you're assuming based off of what?
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind right away is I assume that staff that call into work don't want to be here.
Okay. So that's
it's an assumption, right? I mean, we all have filters on one another sometimes. And if we don't clear out those filters or those assumptions and make room for something else, and make room for maybe that conversation that's going to lead you to what is really happening. I mean, I could assume that if a client's not making progress, that ABA is not effective, right? But that's my assumption. I don't know what programming is being done. I don't know how that individual learns. I know nothing about that.
Yeah, I think something that everyone could take away too in regards to relationships would be if somebody you walk up and you see them every day and they don't seem to be kind to you, or they ignore you, or they avoid you, or something like that, you assume, okay, they don't like me. What did I do? When that's an assumption. It could be that there's something going on with that person and they're struggling. It has nothing to do with you. So maybe something is, again, back to our values, back to what's really going on, really get what we call the data, or the real, the data, right? So we go and you ask them, you communicate, you see what's really going on, because it might have nothing to do with you. And now you've been assuming and you're taking it personal, and that is something that we can really avoid if everybody just communicated and talked and didn't assume about every single thing.
Yeah. And I mean, we're human beings, right? Like there's always going to be like bias, like our own biases that we have to kind of put to the side or put over here. It's not like they're ever going to go away. I mean, maybe they will, but what really matters is not that they go away, it's that you can push them to the side and look at like the present moment and the communication that you're having between someone else.
Again, it's that connection though. So
it is.
So if you assume that person doesn't like you, or maybe they don't, I mean, it could be true. Maybe you said something that you didn't know, but you communicate about it, you talk about it. We always talk about, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, Yeah. And that's, something that is actually of value too, is it's okay. That's how you learn. Learning is being in an uncomfortable space because it's unfamiliar typically. Well, it is unfamiliar. So I think that that's something that I really encourage anyone, whether you're in the field or not, is to really communicate and ask some of those questions, and, be kind and trying to be judgmental and take in, your bias, as you say, because you do the best you can, but you have to communicate about that. There's lots of that kind of, there's a we could go on. For
Well,
hours
we
and
could
hours
go
with that.
on, because I mean, silence to me
It's a big
also
statement.
can be made into an assumption. So if there's silence, I might think everything's okay. And
Yeah.
it might not be. Which is why communication
Yeah, that's a good point.
is so key. And not going in with evaluations or assumptions or telling the other person what their intent was.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's true. I think we're, as humans, good at that.
Mhm.
You know, and in a lot of ways, we've been told to do that. We've been told to try to connect that way. I was told that way for years and years and years. You should tell people how they're feeling so they think that you understand them. And right.
Yeah, and it also goes into, we, like, as humans, we look at those right and wrongs.
Yeah.
There's really no right and wrong, should or shouldn't, buts,
That's a big one.
right?
The
I've been
butt
taking
is
my
the biggest
dad up.
bud.
I said butt in this, I've been taking my dad on. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we all have that.
Well, I challenge every one of you out there, all 2 subscribers that we have.
Yes,
I believe.
wonderful.
I challenge you to take out the but in your sentences. So, you know, that was great that you did that for me. I really appreciate it. But I would rather you do this, or I'm just making up something, you know, now you just erase the whole part of the sentence, because it's kind of like a passive aggressive way of getting your point. And you know, so it's interesting, because it really does make you think about what you're saying, and how that can be perceived or come across, or what you really mean too. So yeah, I think that's an easy one to really focus on, even when you're writing. Because how many times do you write and you say but? It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing it, even sending emails, I'm like, and
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah, it definitely is a place to start for sure.
Yeah, but we're all, I can't say we're all, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but see, because I can't say you all. Because
That's
I don't
another
know,
part of it.
I don't know, right?
I know.
I can't say always. I said always earlier too.
It's a progression. It's a everyday.
I said
learning.
I said calling in all the time. All is another, because that's not observable and measurable.
Well, there you go.
So there's that.
We're all learning.
Yeah, we all learn, right?
I'm sticking to the butt right now. That's my goal.
Yeah, that's like a step. Yeah,
it's easier. It is.
It is.
For me, it is.
Yeah,
because I can go, oh, okay.
See, I said butt again. There's also this like right and wrong. I was raised with right and wrong.
Right.
And I do think, this is my thought, that society is built that way. You're right or you're wrong. I mean,
because the gray is hard. Everything in between right and wrong, so to speak, is, I mean, we're a society of rules. Order.
And you're reinforced by being right.
Yeah.
Our clients are reinforced by being right. We're reinforced by being right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, even like, I don't public speak. I'm doing it right now. But I don't like to public speak because of what others might think of me, or me saying something that's wrong.
Right.
And I mean, I would hope that we could have a little grace in the right and the wrong, and have an acceptance of the gray.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's part of the culture that we're continuing, to try to cultivate and grow. And it's just a never ending learning experience. And that's kind of how I look at it, you know, is it's okay to not know. I think that's another big lesson in really life, is to be okay with saying, oh, I'm not really sure. You do the best you can in the moment, because, you know, in our fields, you have to do something, you know, when you're in the moment. So you make the best decision that you can that's occurring, and then you can come back and do something that's obviously more that's going to support what we're trying to do, long-term or even short-term, but sometimes it's in the moment. So it's okay to say, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you about this. This is what we're going to do, today, or until I, come back to supervise, but it's okay. And so that's something I'm working really hard on with everybody, is that it's okay to not know. And it's really not the end of the world. It really isn't. So, yeah, that would be another right versus wrong. You don't have to know at this moment.
Yeah, and when we're not able to live in the uncomfortable, is what I call it, of not knowing something, what we end up doing is knowing parts of it and stating that, or knowing pieces of that, or maybe just like making something up. And then you're in this like behavioral trap piece, right? So then it's like a backpedal of this. Where I think it would have been easier to say, I don't know.
Yeah. Because it really is okay. So that's one thing I think that is a part of the culture, that we continue to try to, again, cultivate, is that it's okay not to know, and then come back to it. So how long are we?
Oh, I don't know. It just asking me to set up something and I don't want to. So.
Oh. Okay. Okay, cool. So let's see here so we talked a little bit, of vision. That would be the next kind of part. To give you,
I have a question for you though. Yeah. What was your vision when you started the company, and what has it evolved to be?
That's a good one, because it changed every couple of years for sure. And it was fun to kind of have to think about what the vision is now, because we've accomplished a lot of what we were trying to do. Now we're kind of, replicating it, so to speak. It's exactly what we're doing. So it started where I was working for another company, and my vision at that moment was that there was pieces missing. To put it simply, is that I think the box of ABA, and knowing the basics, the principles, and all of that is very important. So you've got to know that. But then I like to quickly generalize. I like to quickly teach or do in a way that doesn't. I took all the things that ABA had a bad name for, specifically kids talking like robots or acting like robots, they're not being treated like humans is another one. I'm trying to think of all the different things that it's just too programmed. I don't know how to
and sometimes I hear that it's all compliance training.
Yep, and it was. I'll be honest with you, it was. Back in the day, that one research thing that was done way back in the beginning, it's not been done for years, shouldn't even be done for you now, but the Look at Me, that was a big one for me. That was done for a really long time, if you look back in the research with that. I was in some of the original replicated studies in Wisconsin, so that was 27 years ago or so, before there was funding. That was one of the things we were doing. They were replicating it, and you saw kids. It was not fun. You saw kids, you say to them, look at me. You prompt them physically most of the time. That's what they used to do. And then you would reinforce them, so that the idea would be that they would do it again. It would occur again in the future. And it actually did the opposite. So this is what I love about ABA. So they had done that, and I'm sure, I don't have the study in front of me, but obviously they saw merit in it. They saw an increase in eye contact, but it was very forced. It was like, and I saw that when they were replicating some of those, is you would see them like turning sideways with their eyeballs out of the side of their head, because it was aversive. So they disproved that and said, you can't do that. This is what you should do instead. And, so on. This is what ABA is, they do it, they replicate it, and they say, oh, actually, this is not what we're looking for. So that's what made me kind of go, so how do you get contact naturally, without it being forced? And that was my growth mindset. So that made me want to branch out. And so that was one of the ones that I really felt pretty strong about, is that natural eye contact, that natural relationship. It really wasn't taught back then, back in the day. And so that's why that was my goal, is to get that natural relationship, that natural pause that you do. So if I stop talking right now and you're doing something, you'd probably look up and say, why did she stop talking? That's a natural pause in life. That's something that we all do. I want to teach that. So, so that's what I started doing before, the research as far as that goes, like, how do you implement that? And then people start doing that and start teaching that, and they replicate it, and so on and so forth. So that was my goal. I started just with myself, achieved that goal. A couple of people that were staff, just techs, and we called them, what do we call them? Tutors, therapists, we call them all sorts of stuff. I can't remember back then. And they really fell in love, changed the degree and came on board. Then the vision was, okay, let's, I fell in love with going to the school part of it, because schools didn't want us in there because of the stuff that's bad out there, and hooked up with a few schools, helped a couple kids. Then I thought, we really need to have this all in one place. So I got to start a clinic, and then we could start a school within the clinic, and then we'll have everybody in one spot. We'll have control over the environment. Parents can come in, and then we can fade back into their home. Because in the old, it still happens. I'm not saying in-home is bad, but you've got to be able to generalize. And just because you're going in home doesn't mean parents are involved. That's the other thing. It's an assumption that parents are involved, and actually quite frequently they check out because they're like, oh my gosh, I have a break.
Yeah.
That happens. Not everybody.
Hey, I don't blame.
Yeah, seriously, like, you're here, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted,
Yeah.
So there's again, it's all in balance and perspective, and it's all good. But that I took it from the opposite kind of place. And then I want kids to be able to have a place to go, and parents to be able to relax, not get a call every 5 seconds if their kid is doing this and that. So that was the next vision. And that took many years to do the school. And then the school grew quite large, quite quickly, because the need is obviously there. So then the next vision was that we needed to separate the locations, so the school could fill out their building, and that we could fill ours up, and we could replicate, by location. So that was that vision. So now that's what we're doing right now, is the school is very successful as a full building. That's a whole separate goal and thing down that. It's awesome. And so now we're replicating and rebuilding Mount Pleasant, because a lot of it was a brand new building, and that's the whole COVID thing too. But so that's what we're doing now. So now the vision has changed again, is to rebuild that, fill that out. It'll be like I said, it's going to be brand new in a few weeks. And then now we've started an adult program. Nicole has started an adult program here, and you want to talk a little bit about that, and like where we want to be? That's kind of the next vision upon still building our foundation.
Yeah, it started actually with the after school program. So what we started to notice is that a lot of individuals who are going to school still needed that treatment. So where do they go after school? And we wanted to have an outlet where they could receive their ABA therapy without it interfering with their school day. And so we started with the after school program. And then what kind of came from that is individuals who needed more of a comprehensive program, or maybe some additional hours that the after school program couldn't provide. So what happened then was making the life skills program. And so with the life skills program, they work on all the functional skills that they would need to potentially live on their own one day, have a job, and so on and so forth. Now those kids got older, right? Yeah. And so with that population, we said, okay, well, now we need an adult program, because those kids are older, and what are they going to do?
Right.
And there's such a wide range, as we know, with autism, that some of them were working more on vocational skills, some of them were working more on adaptive daily living, and some of them really just needed that behavior reduction. And I say just, but it's not just. It's all behavior reduction. So right now we have after school the life skills program. We have a behavior mod program that works. It's a 6 month to a year program that works strictly on behavior reduction. And what happens is they oftentimes transfer into either the Sonnenberg school or their home school. It's a very short yet intense program. And then we have the adult program. And so the adult program is also kind of like tiered off in its own ways. When we talk about adults, we also talk about person-centered planning. So really there's no like set schedule per se. The clients that we have or the participants that we have in that program are the schedule and everything they do is built around their skill sets and meeting them where they're at. We have clients that are working on getting their diploma. We have clients that are working on vocational skills because they're going to have a job one day. We have clients working on more adaptive daily living, more independence, attending peer interactions because at some point they might do a residential facility or they're going to possibly be with us a long time in like a day service program. So through there, and COVID happened, right? So when COVID happened, we were like, well, I can't bring these kids out into the community because we didn't have, we just couldn't, right?
Yeah.
So I said, no problem. We'll do a coffee shop. So that's where the coffee shop came. And we opened up the coffee shop so that they could work on these vocational skills because it involved inventory, it involved taking orders. There's all that social interaction component to that. So they would go and making the coffee. I forgot about that part. And so they started just going around to all the different staff members in the building. And started taking their orders and making their coffee. We had some like concessions, like they could order chips, candy, whatever.
Did you say the inventory too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All the inventory.
Yeah. And that's where I did a lot of my
research
pieces. Just to kind of expand research as it relates to vocational skills. And autism and looking at technology to do so. So there was some technology components to my research that I did. We had a couple participants that actually were so good at their job in this coffee shop that phased out of the research. They hit that ceiling where they couldn't continue anymore.
Right.
And so that was kind of exciting to see though too, because it means that adult team kind of did what they needed to do. And now this individual will go and have a job out in the community and be successful in that.
So to piggyback that or to ask you just some questions about adult research and ABA, how does that work? Does it look different? Does it look the same? How would you explain that?
The problem is there's not enough.
Yeah.
So to say it looks different, yes, it does, but there's also not enough. So I think that if there was more out there, that maybe it wouldn't look so different. It's just that there's either less research because people don't have access and resources to the adult population. It was really difficult for me to find participants for my study, even though we had everything that we had. And I had to have participants that were on like that someone else was overseeing and all these things, right? So with the research, a lot of it is on like task analysis, prompting, like different prompting hierarchies that you would use to like treat independence or gain independence, increase that.
And that's all electronic for them? Are they doing that through a software, or how are you?
There is a lot of research on different technology pieces
Okay,
that will teach prompting or teach that task analysis.
okay,
So what I did that was different was providing reinforcement through technology.
oh,
So
okay.
that's the piece that was a little
And how'd you
different.
do that?
Through text messaging.
Oh, okay,
So they got their preference assessment of like what kind of text message they wanted, what was motivating to them, whether it was like certain pictures or emojis, or if they're fine getting like a text that said like good job, or
yeah,
and we had all the task analysis components within there too. So it is really cool research. A lot more can be done with it. So the research that I have done is not even 1% of what can be done.
okay. Well, I think I mean, everything you just described is traditional ABA, really. It's the civil principles, it's just looks maybe a little bit different because, well, how much funding there is so limited too.
That's
I
a
mean,
huge part.
That's where you see, and why you see companies want the little people. So, you know, as soon as they're diagnosed to, you know, 4, 5, before they go to school, because that's where the funding is. That's where the money, that's the money maker. And that's where you see businesses popping up and doing those kind of things, and then kind of saying bye. And you know, autism's autism, and that's a big part of, you know, some of the backlash in ABA too, is it doesn't just go away. You know, it's not like, okay, so there's a cure and you're cured now. I mean, they don't, and I shouldn't say they, the community is in a big, that's another big kind of rough area to talk about, because you have a divide in that as well of what, you know, the community and adults feel about that have that diagnosis, right?
Yeah, I mean, one, it takes some experience to work with adults.
For sure.
It also takes some experience to work with adults that engage in extreme maladaptive behaviors. That's a whole nother ballgame. In addition to the funding, let me know if you get rich off of adult funding. I would like to know how, because I just, let us know. Because because it's just not, it's not enough. It's not there. And because of the funding, and because there's not a lot of programs that offer this in this field, so there's a lot of there's a lot of residential facilities. Like you can go to a residential facility, you can do all of this. None of them necessarily relate just to autism,
right?
And
ABA.
And ABA, right? And there's some certified BCBAs that will do residential and, you know, things like that. And I applaud them all for that, because it is challenging and it takes some experience to do that.
For sure.
The funding has been a difficult one for us, you know,
for sure.
Because then you also go into what pieces of it are you going to do, because there's day service, there's residential, there's job coaching, there's daily living, and there's different requirements for all of those different codes.
The codes.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I mean, it is hard. And I think, you know, it's like the chicken or the egg, or the egg before the chicken. There's fun. How do you get the funding? You got to have the research, but you know what I mean? It's like, wow.
Well, exactly. Because to have ABA cover it,
you've got to, it's got to be
it has to be research based, right? There's no funding to have the adult populate, to have resources to the adult population to create the research, and then so it's this whole thing.
It is. That's what makes it tough. But that's why you hear ABA, which is applied behavior analysis. I don't actually think we said that. But why you hear, oh, that's for young kids. That's for kids that are 2 or 3 or 4 or what have you. And you know, it also, one reason why the clinic was a really important vision at one point is because being in home for parents, I mean, most families, I think I don't have the data in front of me, but most people are working.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. So then you were separating income brackets within home, because the families that could stay in home and have one person home were at a different income bracket potentially, because most people have two. I don't, again, have the research, but I would say that that's pretty accurate, that most people are working, you know, it's a 2 income household. So that was another reason too, that now you're leaving out this whole other population and you're not giving them equitable access. So that was another reason too. Then comes COVID again and wipes and makes that difficult for us and everybody across the country and probably world with, you know, staffing and things like that. So that's something again that we're getting back to pre-COVID times too, that's the mission. We have to be able to staff and provide what we've promised to kids for, you know, their time here with us.
Yeah.
So I think that that's another thing that again is reinstilling things that were pre-COVID and getting back to that old vision, really, that is the current vision. So that's important too. I think is, again, it's replication again of what we had before. So that's kind of a lot of information.
I could go on and on and
yeah. So once we post this video, we would love to have things that you want to hear about our 2 subscribers, hopefully 3 or 4 after this.
Yay.
We'd love to hear topics. We have what we've been making, you know, kind of jotting down for us that we think would be interesting for families that might watch this or staff. And one thing that I wrote down on here is one thing that's really Nicole's really passionate about and that I'm very passionate about is the integrity piece, and that it's embedded into every aspect of what we do, and how we treat people and the quality of everything that we do. So that's something that I think we could definitely dive into more. I think ACT is something you really could dive into more because it's not typically what people think of when they think of ABA. Typically, I would say.
I think it would be important to address burnout too. I mean, that's a real thing.
Oh, that's a real thing.
And some of these strategies could potentially help with that. I know they help me, so.
For sure. I mean, absolutely. So that's something, but we'd love to hear anything that you have to say, or any suggestions that you have with that. Is there anything else that you want to talk about as far as your research or that you want to talk about with that in that aspect? I mean, we have lots of other podcasts we can do, but I just wanted to see if there was anything that we missed.
I don't think so. I mean, I guess if I say anything, it's just to encourage more people to provide adult services and to continue the research on with it.
Well, and I would say piggyback that that kind of summarizes is really everything that happens every year with us here. Something pops up that we're like, wow, that's a really big need. So as we talked about visions throughout, every year something popped up that's a huge hole, like the school situation, that's a huge hole. You know, like all the things that you just talked about with adults or kids, even the beginning program that you know, for 2, 3, 4-year-olds has changed quite a bit, because you wouldn't do and focus on a lot with a 2-year-old that you would obviously focus on a 30-year-old, you know, even though you're using the same principles. And that's what I think is cool about ABA, is because it's still the same basic principles of the way. That's what I love about us, is it looks different with that 2-year-old, that 2-year-old, that 3-year-old. It can look very different. And that's one thing that has always been my vision, is to continue to go back to that individual, not a blanket, like we do this for everybody and we do this, then you do this, then you do this. Obviously there's certain things and certain areas, and as you gain experience, you can help with the next kid and, with
Mhm.
adults or, what have you, but that's what I love about ABA,
Yeah.
is that it really is, you go back to the basics. And, I mean, what would you say about that? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it all goes back to the individual. Sometimes what we forget is we're so focused on the clients, but all of this applies to our team and our staff and
100%.
all their hard work and making sure that we don't skip over that. They need reinforcement, they need motivation, we need that, our clients need that, our parents need that. So the principles of ABA apply everywhere.
For sure. And one thing that I think a lot was lost during the last couple of years in COVID times was that connection and that relationship and that reinforcement, because that's the reinforcement for a lot of people. There I go with a lot of people. But when we had to do the 6 feet apart and had to do in home, and we could only have so many per floor for room or whatever, you saw a very big decrease in, they weren't reaching, they wanted that connection, they wanted that's what made people happy.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of that.
Yeah, the connection. I mean, going back to COVID too, we are kind of, receiving more clientele that are around that school age piece that are demonstrating some pretty intense problem behaviors because of maybe lack of structure, consistency, communication, seeing peers. They don't know what to do around peers. So that really kind of shut down a lot of growth.
For sure. And I see that even with my own kids or with kids just in general, schools are reporting higher, mental health.
Yeah, that's what it really is, the mental health aspect.
Yeah. And that plays into what we do, and that's, I guess, the point too of why I love what we do is they're humans. Everybody's a human being and has feelings, and, that I think is so important, which is why I like the ACT part of that. Because that's also a big thing that was not addressed back in the days with ABA is it didn't matter,
the people.
Yeah,
I mean, the people are everything.
Yeah.
They're
100%.
Yeah,
for sure. So I think that's probably enough for today. But I thanks for joining us, and hopefully you've made it through to the end. And we're hoping that next week will be, or whenever we're doing it again, you're gone next week, so maybe the following week. So 2 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, we'll do a live. I'll be posting about that, and we'll let you know what that topic is. But any ideas, please let us know. But thanks for joining with us. See you later.